Hello and welcome back to the podcast that must not be named. I'm Melissa.
I am Luke.
We are here doing the final recap episode of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. We are going to be discussing chapters number 36, The Parting of the Ways, and 37, The Beginning.
The Beginning. The last chapter of the book. It's called The Beginning.
It's so true. All right.
So we reached out to our friendly patrons and friends of the show, and again, every book, at the end of the book, Jason, our good buddy, has delivered, right? He sent us a full page email with questions, thoughts, comments about, one, the show, and two, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Melissa, do you have Jason's email close at hand?
Oh, I do. It's bullet pointed.
He's an engineer, so of course it is.
I know. I appreciate the bullet points. So I'm going to go bullet point by bullet point. If we want to make any comments on them, we will. Otherwise, we'll just answer the ones that are questions and then move on from there.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here we go. Bullet point number 1. You guys dogged on chapter 2, and I understand your points, but this is incredibly important to the story. This is where Harry realizes that he is connected to Voldy. I'd say one of the most important revelations in the book. Jason, I feel like them's fighting words because it was a slog to get through that chapter, but I see your point.
It's the one where I get that one, and
it's the one where he
thinks about writing letters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he just thinks about writing to Harry or to Ron.
He thinks about writing.
He thinks about writing to Hermione. He thinks about writing to Dumbledore, and then he actually writes to Sirius. Yeah. It's a narrative tool for sure. Like there's some information that we get, no doubt at all. And it is on, the coattails of like Jason said, him realizing that there's some kind of connection between Voldemort and himself. But I just think the same information could have been done in like any other chapter with
some plot points. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's
all right.
We did dog on it, but
thank you for appreciating a chapter that was one of our lesser chapters. So, there are people who like everything.
There's a chapter for everyone.
All right. Bullet point number 2. You guys also hated on Amos Diggory, but he's one of my favorite characters. He gives his kid a hard time and isn't afraid to pick on others. That's my kind of While he may not be the brightest, he's passionate about his job and doing the right thing. Though I admit he can be narrow-minded and quick to jump to conclusions, I think it's understandable to have issue with Harry not correcting Rita Skeeter on neglecting Cedric, who is his pride and joy in the article. I also like how he didn't say anything to Harry after Cedric's death, just sobbed. He's an imperfect dad that I can relate to.
For the record, I don't think I hated on Amos Diggory. I think I defended him pretty well against your tirade.
And I think that it shouldn't be the 14-year-old's fault that an adult reporter left out his kid. I don't think it's Harry's fault, is my only point.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some spite there, right? It's a bit vindictive. He's not the most mature, but like Jason pointed out, he's an imperfect adult. He's an imperfect dad, and I think that's a really well-written character. Mm-hmm. And it's an important character as well because it kind of puts Harry in a position of learning that not everyone fawns over everything he does, even though Harry's never asked for that, right? I'm not saying that at all, but there are other people who have different motives and motivations, and sometimes you're unfairly blamed for things, and so even just for Harry's development, it's good to have a character like that around.
I also think, like, as a parent, I'm gonna back up my kid.
Yeah.
All the time. Like that's my default. It doesn't matter. Like that's my kid, that's my family, and I'm gonna be in their corner. Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like to me. Okay. Point 3. I thought Ludo Bagman was the bad guy when I first read this. He was right there before the dark mark was put into the sky, then was the first to go investigate the scene. I figured he framed Winky. Every time he tried to help Harry, he was denied, so I figured he was the one going behind everyone's backs and helping Harry through Hagrid and Dobby. I figured the goblins were bad and worked for Voldy and were using their own brand of magic to help Harry through Task 3. Nobody suspects him because he's a famous start, but he wound up working for Voldy to cover gambling debt and or fix the World Cup. That's what he thought. Like, because he's famous, he's like... Which I don't disagree. The first time I read it, it seemed like Ludo was like the setup guy, right? He was the guy we were supposed to think was the bad guy because he just kept being around at weird times, and I can see that that's a good catch. We didn't really mention that at all.
Well, we talked about how it's like, should we really be questioning him? Like it's intended for us to have that, the same as like Percy Weasley in book 2. It's like, yeah, like the evidence is there, but it's hard to look at it and be like, I never really thought of him as a bad guy in general, and he's a bit oafish, but good natured in general. Just and as we find out, he's still not a real nice guy, but no. He's not necessarily evil, I guess. But I think it's completely valid that if you're on a first read to, you know what, maybe the thing that it looks like it's supposed to be, maybe that's what it is. Like, sometimes it's not a big reveal. Sometimes it's just, oh, it was this. Like, that's fine.
All right, next point. I really want to know what Barty Jr. as Moody told Neville at their tea party after the very first lesson.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like, because BCJ, Barty Crouch Jr., was one of the Death Eaters that tortured Neville's parents. He was in that group of 4 that were brought in for specifically torturing the Longbottoms. Like, that's a pretty messed up situation going on there. And the fact that, like, remembering back to that, we gave Moody the chapter MVP that chapter.
Right.
Like, what? Like, how does he come across as so sentimental and emotionally thoughtful? Yeah, like, that's crazy.
That's all kinds of nuts.
Yeah,
and like, it's messed up.
That's a really good. I'd love to be a fly on the wall there, knowing that, like, with the information that we have now, like, that is like, do you think he was like offhand snide comments like about Neville's parents being like, oh, I know what happened to your parents, that's so awful, right? Like, oh wow, that was just terrible.
I would say probably not, just because he might be better off saying nothing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Say nothing, drink to forget. I don't know. I would like to be a fly on the wall. That's a really good catch. All right, that's a next point. I wish you would have talked about Ron not going to bed after his spat with Harry. So this is the chapter where Harry goes and sees the dragons and then has his conversation with Sirius. Mm-hmm. And after he's talking to Sirius, Ron comes in. And then Ron doesn't go to bed. Jason says, to me, that has always made him a much deeper character. Like, what was Ron doing? What was he thinking about? What was his internal struggle happening during that I can't go back to sleep points?
Yeah, I think a lot of our conversations there, one of the main things that I was kind of on is, you know, Ron's completely valid in why he feels the way he does. And as to specifically that night, I mean, I think, yeah, he feels, I don't know about betrayed, but embarrassed about the whole thing. And like, it's hard when your best friend you're not on the same team, right? Like, that's hard. And that's a first for both of them. And Harry's really frustrated at the time because of things that Ron doesn't know about. And yeah, no, I think Ron does a little bit of, I don't know about reevaluating, but just thinking about the whole situation and, like, kind of maybe taking a step back and thinking about what part he had to play in anything and how that his choices have affected their relationship.
All right, next point. Jason says, I wouldn't have wanted to enter the Triwizard Tournament if I was the 6th or 7th year, and I think a lot of people would be the same. I bet the other 2 schools are the same size as Hogwarts, but they just didn't have enough interest. So the idea that Beauxbaton and Durmstrang only brought a few people, and how come they didn't bring as many? Well, maybe they just had a bunch of kids who didn't feel like it. Mm-hmm. Because it's pretty dangerous. I probably wouldn't join it. So I can agree with Jason's sentiment in that. And that's a really good point as to why they may not have brought all of their 6th and 7th years.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay. He says that why didn't Harry or anyone just use the summoning charm on the egg in task 1? That's a pretty reasonable question.
Perfect. No one even just like tried. No, let's summon a broom that's probably a mile away.
Like, let's transfigure a rock into a dog or something. Yeah. Like, no, how about just Accio egg?
Yeah, and if it's the wrong egg, you try again.
You just send that one back.
Or use that one. throw that in a different direction to get the dragon to go and collect that one.
And you summon another egg.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
problem solved.
There it goes.
Okay.
There it is. I have nothing against that. That is exactly what you should do.
It's brilliant. Okay. Mrs. Weasley was justified in her judgment of Hermione, Jason says. She didn't know, and she didn't know, and it's possible in her mind Harry and Hermione could have gotten together. Ron, Fred, George, they wouldn't have bothered telling her, and although Ginny could have, Jason says. And he says, I think it's an excellent example of JK to show how even the best people can be manipulated and fooled by misleading media reports. #truth.
Yeah, it's a good point for sure. I still think Molly, knowing who Rita Skeeter is, like fundamentally, how are you gonna put any credence behind that, right? Like, because later on, she specifically says to Amos Diggory, "You know what Skeeter is like, you know, like so she knows the reputation that Rita has, and she knows how awful she is, and still just blindly." Yeah, like it's one thing to read it and be like, oh, well, that's weird. Like, oh, that makes me feel weird. And then she should follow up and not just be, she's just mean.
She, of all the adults in the Wizarding world who are reading Rita Skeeter, has the most chance to get some insider information. She could have sent a letter to Ron or to Ginny and said, hey, is this really going on? Rather than just assuming that it's true.
Right. Yeah. Follow your facts.
Yeah. Okay. Next point. I think Hagrid was another good example of how a perfectly good person can be twisted by prejudice. When he flies off the handle about Krum, he has just seen Karkaroff insult the greatest man he'd ever known, and Hagrid, had just been rejected and shunned by Maxine. He was emotional, as we know he can be, and was concerned for Harry's safety. Just a great situation that shows how quickly and easily people can turn to hate instead of understanding.
That's a good point.
I really like how Jason takes all of the points of Hagrid's story, this particular book, and leads them to that culmination of just assuming that Krum is wrong and that he's going to do something bad, because in Hagrid's experience this year, everyone kind of has.
Right. Yeah. And I like Jason's point about how easy it is to err on the side of hate as opposed to err on the side of understanding. And that's really, really well said. So nice job, Jason.
All right. Next point. He says, I want to know how to get out of the pensieve. This is never shown. Yeah,
we just see that Dumbledore puts his hand on Harry's shoulder and then they fly out. Like, is it just like a mental decision? Okay, I'm done revisiting these thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on the pensieve. It's one of those big magics, right? It's one of those interesting magical tools, and I have thoughts and questions. I can guarantee it's going to come up in a Must Not Tell Lies episode at some point. It's
that's on the list.
So it's a good question on the mechanics of that.
Yeah. Jason also says, also Albus left that door open to the pensieve knowing that Harry would investigate. He's either a seer or the world's best planner. Which is funny. All right, next point. Jason says, I think you guys touched on this, but from a layman's perspective, Rita Skeeter's article about Harry being deranged and dangerous is pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate.
Right? Lupin and Hagrid both put students in mortal peril. Oh, and everyone thought, including Harry himself, that he was Slytherin's heir. The only thing she gets wrong is his attention-seeking personality, which from the outside would be really hard to contradict. Like, that's more of an internal thing. It's hard to say from the outside whether he's deliberately seeking the attention or not, because he gets it anyway.
Yep, I agree, and I think we did touch on that. Of like, yeah, if you're just somebody that has never met Harry and you only know his story, and you're reading this story, and almost everything in there is factual. Almost hired werewolves, half giants, like those are facts, and she's playing on the biases of the common reader. That doesn't make it less valid. Like, it's unfortunate and it's dumb, but
it's not untrue.
It's not untrue, especially for the audience she's writing for. And Harry is feeling pains and potentially having hallucinations. Even he's questioning these things. And we just know, because we're with him all the time, that he's a decent guy. But yeah, I think it's completely valid. And that's from almost any other adult in the wizarding world, like you said a minute ago, the only one that I'm surprised that kind of blatantly believes some of it is Molly Weasley, and that's pretty disheartening. And I think it's one of those, like, we had problems with Hagrid being the scapegoat in book 1, the oaf deliverer of information, right? It's almost like you could have had somebody else do that instead of Molly. I just don't know that she necessarily needed that. I don't know. It shows character depth, I guess, but still.
Okay. In Harry's duel with Voldy, right, didn't we learn in book 2 that the Phoenix song fills the pure of heart with hope and the impure of heart with dread? He asked, is he imagining that? So I know it's supposed to fill your heart with hope, but I don't remember the impure of heart part. Do you remember that at all in book 2?
I don't.
Okay. Well, as you're looking, so the Jason goes on to say, if that's true, that would explain why Voldemort is terrified and he's probably never known fear as an adult. Right? Like, all of a sudden this song, and it's supposed to fill your heart with dread. So whether or not he's actually shocked by this happening and scared of what Harry's doing, or if the song itself is helping to sort of increase that fear, that's kind of a cool theory, I think.
Yeah, no, in general, I really like the idea. I'm trying to read through the Chamber of Secrets chapter where that's really the other example that we have of it.
Right. And while you're doing that, he also goes on to ask, so it makes sense that they hear the Phoenix song because their wands share a phoenix feather core. Right? He says, I wonder what would happen if it was shared dragon heartstring cores or shared unicorn tail hair cores. What would they have heard or felt? As in, like, if two people have the same dragon, a heartstring from the same dragon, what would they hear? As opposed to the Phoenix song, because one would assume it wouldn't be a Phoenix.
Right. Yeah, no, it seems like it would likely be something, a dragon roar, something that would be, I don't know. The Phoenix is pretty convenient for it.
It is, right? Yeah. And then what does the unicorn say?
What does the fox say?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like the unicorn, what does the unicorn say? I mean, dragons, at least it might be roars or something. I can reasonably predict that, but I don't know. Do they neigh? Do they whinny?
I think they sprinkle.
Oh. Multicolored.
Yeah, I'm not finding anything right now about the filling the impure of heart with dread. I like the idea.
I do.
I just don't remember that. So
no,
I'll do more research.
Okay. 2 more points from Jason. He says, I always assumed that the Death Eaters in the graveyard were Voldy's generals, not the entire group of baddies, and that's why there's only a few of them.
Okay.
I really like that theory.
Yeah, and I think we were questioning, like, wow, this doesn't seem like very many at all. But, like, yeah, you wouldn't expect all of the little minions to be there necessarily. And maybe the Death Eater title is a much more select group, right? It's much more, hey, you've proven yourself, you're kind of the inner circle now. And that's why, you have to be by Voldemort's side whenever he calls, no matter what, as opposed to, you're not going to do that and have 900 people show up. Like, that's not going to happen.
First of all, we have not planned the venue for that.
We need to get catering. We got logistics to figure out.
Do we have enough restrooms involved? I'm so confused.
Someone visit the fire code. Do we have enough? Do we have enough exits? What's the egress situation?
All right. So here's Jason's last point, and it bothers me simply because he's agreeing with Riley.
Oh, the worst.
I know, right? But okay, so here's what Jason says. I 100% agree with Riley that Harry looks guilty when he gets back from the graveyard. Frankly, it's a miracle he didn't get arrested. From the Hogwarts standpoint, it totally looks like he port-keyed Cedric away, killed him, and came back to claim the cup. How are you going to cover it up? I'm going to create a story about Voldemort. Everyone knows there's a connection anyway, and Harry's story does sound like he made it up in about 60 seconds. That's a really funny point.
Yeah, it's good.
It is good. And I kind of see it. Like, all of a sudden you show up and one of you is dead and there's absolutely no it's never really explained how Cedric died if you don't believe Voldemort or the story of Voldemort. which obviously, like, what's his name? The
Fudge.
idiot minister of magic, him. Yes, how Fudge seems to, oh, it was an unfortunate accident. How?
Yeah, like, regardless, I understand that you don't think he's back, but like, what do you think happened? Like,
Right. Give me another reasonable solution that isn't Harry getting arrested, because that really could be.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Fudge honestly probably thinks that Harry did it,
Yeah, maybe. I don't
and
know.
all of the evidence points to that being completely plausible.
All right. That wraps up our listener questions. Thank you so much to Jason for sending out like some really amazing thoughts. I love how detailed he is when he listens to us. So keep it up.
And this has been Jason's Corner.
Barty Crouch Jr. was born to Mr. and Mrs. Crouch in 1962, with his father focused mainly on his political career. In his teenage years, Barty Crouch Jr. became enthralled with the dark arts and was an adamant young supporter of Lord Voldemort. After the Dark Lord's fall in 1981, Barty Jr. attempted to locate his master along with several other Death Eaters by cursing Frank and Alice Longbottom with the Cruciatus Curse, causing them to go insane. He, along with his cohorts, were captured and sent to life imprisonment in Azkaban by none other than his very own father. A few years passed, and Barty's mother became deathly ill and pleaded with her husband to help free their son. Doing as his loving wife had asked, the two visited their son in prison, and with the help of Polyjuice Potion, she took his position and he took her looks and left with his father. Mrs. Crouch eventually died in prison and was buried in an unmarked grave. Mr. Crouch kept his son prisoner under the Imperious Curse over the next several years. At times, Barty Jr. would be able to break free, like at the Quidditch World Cup, where he stole a wand off a boy seated in front of him and set the Dark Mark to appear when unfaithful Death Eaters started to have their fun. Shortly after that, Lord Voldemort, who was being aided by Wormtail, had learned of Crouch's existence and freed him of his father's control, placing Mr. Crouch under the Imperious Curse. Barty Jr., along with Wormtail, attacked Alastair Moody in the morning of the first day of school. Barty took Moody prisoner and used his hair to take his form using more Polyjuice Potion. At Hogwarts, Barty, disguised as Moody, used all of his tricks to ensure the Dark Lord's plan came to fruition. He started by defending Harry from an attack from behind by Draco Malfoy. He made certain to confund the Triwizard Cup to draw Harry's name for the tournament. He convinced Hagrid to show Harry the dragons, and subsequently showed Harry his best chance at defeating the dragon. He gave Neville a book of plants to help Harry learn about the Gillyweed he would need for the second task, and when he failed, made sure Dobby would learn about it to get it to him. When Mr. Crouch suddenly appeared in Hogwarts ground to warn Dumbledore, Barty Jr. snuck from behind and killed him, turned his body into a bone, and buried him in front of Hagrid's cabin. Before the third task, Barty brought the cup to the center of the maze, where he turned it into a portkey, and once Harry entered the maze, he did all that he could to ensure his victory. He stunned Fleur, Imperious Crumb, and used his eye to help eliminate some challenges even before Harry ever encountered them. Once Harry returned from his face-off with the Dark Lord, Barty, still as Moody, pulled him from Dumbledore's vision and questioned him about Voldemort's return. Losing sight of the dangers coming for him, he was later stunned and captured by the headmaster. After his capture, Barty admitted to doing all of this for the love and honor of Lord Voldemort. And so, because of this, I find the true villain of this book to be Barty Crouch, Sr. As Sirius put it best, should have spent a bit more time at home with his family, shouldn't he? Ought to have left the office early once in a while, got to know his son. And maybe Barty Jr. might not have gone looking for a father figure in someone as evil as Lord Voldemort.
And joining us now, as always, is our first-time reader, Riley. Riley, welcome back.
Hey, what's going on?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be done with the book. Glad to keep on pushing.
All right. So done with the book. Glad to be done with the book. What is your big takeaways, if you will, that you're glad to be finished?
Oh, I mean, we're getting into it. The story just started. We read the beginning, right? So
3 years later.
Exactly. We're just getting started. I'm excited. It seems like we're breaking out into, with the whole return of Voldemort, and we see kind of in this section, I guess, specifically, we get to see sort of the political outlier, like the political outline of this whole transition, them trying to convince the Minister of Magic that he's back, and we see how that could be part of the struggle, just that transition of Voldemort being back being a thing coming up. So I think it's interesting that we're going to start diving into this kind of overarching plot that we've been leading up to this whole time.
Alrighty, so let's jump in first with speaking of political and the overarching plot of Voldemort. Chapter 36, which was the parting of the ways, which really is, I like to call the Fudge versus Dumbledore chapter. There's other things in there too, but that's kind of the crux of the chapter. Any big thoughts about those two and their conversations?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we kind of see secondhand maybe the amount of influence that Dumbledore might really have on Fudge in the Ministry. You know, Fudge is constantly battling him back with his theories about um, Harry could be delusional. You're gonna trust the word of Crouch, like that's crazy. And then we finally start to see a glimmer of him go back on a few things that he says when Dumbledore threatens to part ways. You know, threatens to no longer necessarily be on his side, and I think that shows whether it's Dumbledore's power or just the amount of influence that he has on the wizarding community. We see him take a step back. We see Fudge take a step back, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, the interaction between those two is one of my favorite parts, almost of the entire series. I love how each of them, for what they believe in, are it's kind of like the Harry and Ron spat earlier in this book of, like, for the information that they have, they're both being honestly pretty reasonable. Like, it makes sense why Fudge is saying what he is. We know it's fundamentally wrong, but
Sure.
for what he has and what he thinks is true, he's not making ridiculous, outlandish claims.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what do you think of Dumbledore's plans? He basically says, you know, these are the two things that you need to do, Cornelius. And he says that one, you need to take the Dementors away from Azkaban, and two, you need to reach out to the Giants, right? Do you think that's a good idea? Like, what do you think of those thoughts there?
I mean, yeah, it seems like they are at a point where they need to put themselves in the best position, right? Gather as many allies as they can. They don't know who's going to turn, so reaching out to the Giants seems like a smart thing to do. And obviously, we know that the Dementors used to be followers of Lord Voldemort, and we learn that they have desires, kind of. I mean, I think it's probably been mentioned before, but we learn that they are able to be influenced through some kind of reward that that Voldemort can cash in on more likely so than the Ministry. So I think that's interesting that obviously Dumbledore knows that they are not an ally, but it's really cool to think about them not just being this soul-sucking evil creature, that they might have some desire to, whether it's probably not money, but it's some kind of motivation for them that I hadn't thought about before. So I think that's a good plan.
All right. Any other thoughts about Fudge and Dumbledore? Do you want to talk about Sirius and Snape at all?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought it was cool that I didn't realize that Sirius was going to be there, and kind of had to go back and to the chapter prior when Dumbledore tells Snape to go get the dog. I had to go
McGonagall, actually, but yes.
Oh yeah, McGonagall go retrieve the dog. I had to read that because I didn't realize that had happened. I didn't pick up on that in the beginning. And so it was cool that he was there, that Sirius was there at the outset when Harry was telling the story. But I do think that the Dumbledore, we see a lot of leadership, right? More so than any other section of the books prior from Dumbledore. We see a lot of delegation and decision making happening on the fly from him, which I really respect. I think that's great. The decision to allow Sirius to reveal himself, especially to somebody like Snape, who has so much animosity towards him.
Well, and let's
I thought
also
that was awesome for Dumbledore.
Let's also point out, like, you're revealing yourself to Snape, who's the one who ratted out Lupin a book ago. So that's pretty ballsy, I think, to allow Snape to be the one who gets to know.
Oh, yeah. Right. And I mean, that could be, I mean, it's probably a calculated play on Dumbledore's behalf because if he can obviously Dumbledore has some influence over Snape, a serious amount, and so if he can just get him to be on the same side as they say right away, then there's probably a lot less to worry about for Sirius being around and involved in the upcoming dealings. If the one who's probably got the biggest target for him or is gunning for him the most, Snape, is kind of subdued.
Oh, that's a good idea. So it's not so much like a we all need to work together, but more of a look, I need to make sure you're on my side. And the best way I can do that is to ensure that you're not going to rat out people who are also on my side.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. I never thought about it that way before. Luke, you think any other questions for chapter 36?
No, more so just, I guess, I don't remember exactly how this happens in the movie, which we'll get to the movie, but again, like Riley grew up watching the movies, and so it's like, is there anything in this chapter that was a big surprise on how it goes down compared to what you knew from the movies at all?
I think there's so much more in the. I don't remember any of this from the movies, and I've seen them a lot. I'm sure there's some kind of wrap up with all of this going on, but there might not have been. I don't think there was a lot of this section in that at the end. So this was all new. I mean, this is at least in my memory, this was all new, and so that was cool. Just like we talked about the interactions between some of these characters. I've never seen that before. So I thought it was an interesting take. It's definitely a different way to end a Harry Potter book, even though we're still in the what the not the health wing, but the what is it called?
The the infirmary ward, whatever that is.
Yeah. So we're still there, which we end up in almost like every book. We end up there near the end, which is funny.
But it's a very different feel.
It's a very different feel, and I think it's exciting. I mean, like I said, we're just now starting this Voldemort has returned plot, and I think that is really going to change the feel of what comes next, and I'm excited for that. So, not too many things that I remember, not too many similarities that I really remember. It was all new.
All right, so let's jump to chapter 37, the beginning. I feel like there's kind of three big parts to this. There's the visit to Hagrid's, the final feast, and then the train ride. So let's start with Hagrid's, where they go to visit Hagrid on sort of those last couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
Anything stand out from that section?
Just that it's good that Hagrid's still around, and good that kind of is that support for Harry that he's always been. So we get a little bit of interesting nuggets of knowledge about Hagrid and Madame
Maxine.
Yeah, Madame Maxine. I guess they kind of have made up a little bit. He doesn't want to talk about it, but we get the idea that things have kind of gotten better
again.
Yeah. And so that's cool. There, I don't feel like there's too much that happens other than, I mean, maybe I've missed it, but other than just Hagrid being there for Harry, I think it was a much needed thing to tie it up.
And I agree. I don't think a whole lot happens there other than just being a support system. So I see that. Then the leaving feast, if you will, and Dumbledore's revelation to some of the students.
Yeah, that's pretty bold, right? But I think Dumbledore is making his move. He knows that all of these students are going to go back to their families. And I think obviously he does it for what he says he does it. He doesn't want to lie to everybody. He wants everybody to know the truth. But also, I think it's a smart play because all these students are going to go back to their families now for a couple months. They're going to tell their parents what Dumbledore has said against the desires of the Ministry of Magic. So I think that this knowledge is going to start spreading to the families, and maybe Dumbledore can recruit. It doesn't even matter at recruiting; it's just getting the awareness out, and I think that's his main play because he's always
word of mouth marketing is excellent marketing.
Oh yeah, and so I think that's his main play in terms of making people aware. I think it's a smart play.
All right, Luke, any questions for Riley about that feast, especially when it comes to like the announcement about Cedric or anything?
Yeah, no, I like what Riley put there of, he needs to get that word of mouth going in a certain light, right? He needs to kind of create that narrative, and it's not creating, it's telling the story, but you always have to make sure you spin it a certain way. And
Oh yeah,
I really really like when Dumbledore says, in my experience, the truth is always preferable to lies, is
oh yeah,
in general the kind of takeaway. And I think that's really powerful that he's doing that. The other thing that happens is Albus then honors Harry, right? And he makes a public display kind of backing Harry and Harry's story. What are your thoughts on that side of it?
I think it's good. I mean, he knows that Harry has always been a target for rumor, and it's almost 90% of the time always been terrible. And so I think really telling the story at this point is beneficial for Harry's well-being because he knows how much Harry has just gone through. So being able to have the students, and especially like it's good that it's the end of the year because all these students can have this story now. They can form. They don't have to sit and stew for 2 months formulating opinions and then coming back and spreading even more wild rumors while all of them have been sitting at home alone for 2 months and during the summer thinking of something even crazier than what have actually happened, even though what did happen is probably one of the craziest things that could have happened.
But there could be less blame on Harry. I mean,
Yes,
there's probably some kids who still blame Harry, but there might be some who at least believe his point of view in
sure.
this.
Yeah, so go on.
I think that's a really good point, and I think a lot of it comes down to I can't remember what I was going to say. Continue. I lost it.
No, that's all right. I was just saying I think it's obviously smart, it's needed, it's necessary. I think it's the way he did it was also it wasn't like, "Oh, but it's cool. Harry still won the tournament and he didn't do anything. Like you guys should like him." It was a very he's gone through a lot and you guys need to respect that he tried everything that he could to do the right thing. And so I think that the way he did it puts a lot of people's mind to ease.
Yeah, I remembered what I was gonna add to that, and it's the media has already been pretty harsh on Harry in the past
Yeah.
several weeks as well. So having that vote of confidence, that show of support publicly, like you're getting at, it only allows people to start questioning for good or evil. Either way, it keeps the discussion open to, maybe there's more to it than what we've read in the newspapers.
Hmm.
All right, are we ready to move to the train ride?
Sure.
All right, so on the train ride, we have Malfoy comes in. And there's the attack on Malfoy. There's the reveal about Rita Skeeter. Any comments on either of those two events?
Can you remind me exactly what gets said about Rita?
That she is an unregistered animagus.
Oh.
She's a beetle, and Hermione has her trapped in a jar.
With an unbreakable charm on it.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
A promise of blackmail should she use her unregistered powers for evil ever again.
Right. So that's how she's been getting all of this information. She's been hiding as a beetle. That's yeah.
Yep.
So I think that's hilarious, and also it makes a lot of sense, right? If you're gonna be a secret animagus and you're gonna try to find information, you want to be something small. So other than that, just being extremely funny. I don't know if I have any more like insightful thoughts about it, but I thought that was cool.
That's one of those on your second read. Whenever you go back and revisit this, you'll notice
it. Yeah,
you'll notice that after the lake, the second task, Victor pulls a beetle out of Hermione's hair.
Yeah,
you notice
when Harry's in Transfiguration, there's a bug buzzing around his head, and he like swats at it.
In divination, up at the window before he passes out, he's kind of daydreaming out the window, and he sees a beetle.
That's the bug out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or how he sees Malfoy once talking to his hand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Those are the neat things you get at the ends of books. You're like, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I got to go find all that. All right, and then I think the other really big thing that happens is what happens with the Triwizard Tournament money.
Winnings. Yeah.
Yes.
Gives that to Fred and George. I think that's I mean, Harry wanted to give it away. I think there's no more family deserving to receive it than the Weasleys. And I think that even though Harry says use it for the joke shop, and I obviously they will, and he says to go get Ron new clothes. But I think Fred and George would end up finding a way because they're so sneaky. Like Mr. and Mrs. Weasley would never accept the money. Ron would never accept the money. But I think because of their mischievous nature, I think Fred and George would find a way to make their families' lives better because they're not jerks. They just like to stir things up. But I think they would find a way to increase their families' lives with the money secretly.
Which is the best way when it comes to the Weasley twins, right?
Right.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. Like, not only will they open their joke shop, but they'll use it to, help out the family without the family knowing really where it came from.
Yep.
All right. Anything else, Luke, before we move to our superlatives and question sections?
Just in general, end of book thought, which we'll have a lot more opportunity to talk about these at the upcoming full book extravaganza, like we always do. But as this is your first time finishing Goblet of Fire, how does it stack up on a book wrap up? Like, do you feel differently? Is it done better? Is it like what are your thoughts on the way it was written and where the story is right now compared to the other three books?
I think that the story gets blown wide open at the end, which I like a lot. I don't think it's any surprise that I am more interested in the happenings that go on outside of the school than the things that happen in the school, and I can start to tell that as Harry is growing up and his perspective and his bubble is expanding, especially into the wizarding world. I like seeing more of the world outside of Hogwarts. Not that I don't like Hogwarts, but
But we've been there for 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the end of this book allows for the opportunity to go and see more things in future books and see a plot line that it's not something hiding in the walls of Hogwarts. It's not something we're worried about just happening at Hogwarts. It's an international or however big the wizarding world is, it's a whole wizarding world problem now. And so I think we'll see solutions. I think we'll meet new people, new creatures, and that's the thing that it makes it the best wrap up for me is that we're expanding the scope of the story, which is exciting.
It blows the whole story wide open for you.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get some questions.
Are you ready for your 2 burning questions?
Sure.
Just 2. All right. First question from chapter 36. What might Fudge want to discuss with Dumbledore about the running of the school?
He's probably going to say that if you spread these rumors, if you go with this story, I'm going to have to try to find a replacement for you. I think that's what my take was. It is that Fudge is using his last bit of influence or his last card to scare Dumbledore into thinking that he's going to lose his job if you spread if you spread this, whether it's true or not. If you put everything into a panic, I'm going to do everything that I can to take you out of here.
Okay. All right. Question number 2. Do you think Karkaroff will truly escape
from Voldemort?
Yes.
I mean, I want to say no because of how panicked he got immediately. I don't think he's in the biggest parallel that you look at is Snape, right? They're 2 former Death Eaters, both in the same spot, both realizing the same thing at the same time. Snape takes it not with a grain of salt, but he takes it calmly and coolly, and he's probably thinking about what are his best options. He's probably thinking logically. Karkaroff is very emotionally based, very emotional jerk reaction to this. So I think that because it's so emotionally charged, he won't be able to come up with the right moves and the right decisions. He'll keep worrying about things that sooner or later he'll fall into the hands of Voldemort again, whether as an ally or as dead, which is more likely the case is him being dead. But I would find it hard to, because Voldemort is so good and so like set on tracking down the people that have betrayed him at this point. I think it would more likely be that he won't be able to escape.
Okay. Do you have any big predictions for the story moving forward?
Big predictions, things that I wouldn't know. I think that we are going to see a lot more come out of obviously a lot more come out of Harry, but I think it's going to be more character choices and hard choices made by Harry. I hope we see that because obviously he's this whole story, he's at the center of it. It's his book, right? But
Yes.
I think that he's going to have to start growing up a lot quicker than than a normal wizard his age would, and I think that he's going to have to make more decisions that impact people's lives, and that's my biggest prediction is that he's going to have to do that, whether that's the next book or not.
Okay.
Well, just get ready for the next book. It's only like 130 more pages than this book. So
Sweet.
It's the biggest.
Yeah.
It's 766 pages in the original UK edition at least.
I love book 5.
Book 5 it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love book 5. Okay. Let's get to some superlatives. What was your favorite line?
So my favorite line, we kind of touched on it, but it's on page 733. It's right at the end of the book, and it's when Harry is giving out the winnings to Fred and George, and he's simply says, "I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't need the money, but I could use a couple laughs. We could all use a couple laughs right now." And he gives them the money. I think that's. I mean, there's not too many substantial line. Not that this section of the book isn't substantial, but there's not too many hard hitting lines. Other than that, I think that it really gets at Harry's ability to understand, even when he goes through personally a great amount of trauma, he's still able to empathize with other people and realize that this is a time where we need to focus on others and we need to focus on getting a little bit of enjoyment out of things while we can. So I thought that was awesome where he gives them the money and says we could all use a couple laughs coming. So
Okay. I like that one a lot too. Last question. Are you ready?
Yep.
Who is your section MVP?
Dumbledore.
Wow. And he didn't even hesitate this time, Luke. Usually there's like hemming and hawing, but
Nope.
I couldn't agree with him more though.
I said a little bit ago, but just the leadership that he shows, just the on the fly making decisions, and we see that paralleled with Fudge, who's the leader of the Wizarding World, or he's the head of the Ministry of Magic, right? So we see Fudge backtracking and finding reasons not to believe this and that, and coming up with all of the political and taking a step back. But Dumbledore doesn't care about any of that. He's got people who depend on him. There are lives that matter now. Everybody is at danger if Voldemort's back. So I just think everything that he's done in this section has just shown his leadership skills, his determination, his ability to just, this is what has to happen. He tells everybody, he tells like 12 people he tells Mrs. Weasley, like, can I count on you and your husband? Like, go do this. We need you. So he utilizes his resources right at his fingertips, and he makes decisions. Yeah, he becomes the boss, and I think there's no other choice.
all right. Luke, anything I missed?
No, I think you did a good job, Melissa. Riley was okay too.
Riley
I made a mistake though. I said the next book was over 100 pages more, but that's not entirely true for you, Riley, because the next book is only 42 pages long, and it's right here in my hands.
That's true. We haven't told you about your actual next assignment.
Right.
No.
What you don't know, and what our listeners are just now going to get their very first introduction to, is that our next 2 books will actually be Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and Quidditch Through the Ages. And we are going to have special guests joining us. Riley is going to be joining us for Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the original.
By Newt Scamander himself.
Wow. Cool. That's exciting. I didn't know that was going to come.
And it, to me, it was like, Abby needs to do the Quidditch book. Riley, I think, will get a big kick out of the Fantastic Beasts book just for the entire chapter on dragons.
I agree.
Heck yeah.
And so the reason we're doing it this way is because we're going in literally the order that books were published. These books came out
I was going to ask.
between 4 and 5. So that's why we've been putting them off until now. And they're fun. They're light. I'm excited to do them. And there's 3 different versions of each of them. So Riley, the one that you're going to be responsible for knowing is this, which is the main one. I'll let you borrow my copy.
Cool.
I think I have 2 copies of the original one.
Do you?
So if we let me know.
So, and then there's another supplementary book that we won't get into until essentially after book 7. And our good buddy and brother Benji will be joining us for that one. He doesn't know about that yet either. So
don't tell him. Don't tell him.
Unilateral decisions for all of you. It's fine.
Everybody listening, don't tell Benji.
Don't tell
Keep
Benji.
him in the dark.
So that is where we'll be going shortly. Exciting stuff. But
all
Riley, I think that wraps us up for your portion of book 4.
And listeners, you can hear Riley again in a few weeks at our end of book extravaganza when we do our big group wrap up.
And then the movie too. The movie as well.
Right on. Sounds great. I'm excited.
Woo. All right. See you, Riley.
See you later, guys. Thanks.
Well, we have another section that we do for our typically a 5-chap recap, but this is our 2-chap recap, and we are joined by our target audience perspective, Lola. What's up?
Hi.
Hi. So, you excited to be done with the book?
Yeah.
Yeah? So, in these last 2 chapters, we have a lot of coming together of the story, right? A lot of people explaining things, a lot of disagreements. What stands out to you? Like, what was the most interesting thing to you in these chapters here?
How the president dude didn't care that his son died, and that he technically killed him.
Huh?
And that he technically killed him.
That Fudge killed?
Technically he did, because he brought the Dementor there.
Oh, okay. So that's not his actual son. Like, that was Crouch's son, not Fudge's son. But you think it's Fudge's fault that Crouch is dead because he shouldn't have brought the Dementor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. One thing, just a personal note, like as I was reading through it again, and we may have touched on this, is Harry's mind, he calls it the Dementor delivered his fatal kiss, and it's not fatal. It's like technically it's
still alive.
He should still be alive. I thought that was an odd way of describing that, and so I don't think he's actually dead. He's just soulless now. But what's the real difference, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So in that first chapter that we're talking about here, chapter 36, the parting of the ways, we have a big disagreement between Fudge and Dumbledore, right? And what's going on and what should happen. What did you think of Dumbledore's stance about the things that are going on with Voldemort returning and believing Harry's story?
I thought he was very calm during the fight, but very trustworthy of Harry, and oh yeah, I totally believe him.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think of Fudge's side of it, where he doesn't know that Harry's telling the truth at all? And do you think he's being a total jerk face, or is he kind of does it make sense why he's saying what he's saying?
I think he's just being a jerk. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that happens in that chapter is Severus Snape and Sirius Black are put face to face, right? We know how much they kind of hate each other. What did you think of them shaking hands and kind of hopefully working past their differences?
I really think they didn't look past their differences, but they were like fine for Dumbledore.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it's at least they can work together enough to not be detrimental to being on the same team, right? Yeah. So I guess we'll have to see about that. So then the next chapter we have the beginning, the last chapter of the book called The Beginning. I mean, it's an odd choice there, but we have several things happen, one of which is Harry, Ron, and Hermione go and hang out with Hagrid a little bit. Do you remember what Hagrid kind of talks about here?
He says something like, I always knew that he was gonna come back. Like, I knew for years. I've just been waiting for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he also Hagrid puts it in a way that, there's no point in stressing about it. Like, we're doing what we can, and what will come, and we'll meet it when it does. Like, it's kind of like, well, don't want to overly stress, because what use is that when we're already doing what we can right now?
Yeah.
You think that's pretty good advice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we have our final feast, right? The Great Feast, the Leaving Feast, if you will. And Dumbledore honors Harry and remembers Cedric and tells the students about what happened, even though he says, like, the ministry doesn't want me telling you this, and some of your parents might be mortified, and that I told you this. What did you think of any of those three things that Dumbledore brings to the whole student body?
I think he should have told all of them. Well, I'm glad that he did tell them all.
Why does that make you glad that the kids all know?
So they're informed of what's going on in the real world. Because, it's not like they're in, kindergarten. They're, pretty old. They're, my age.
Which is why you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think it's beneficial for them all to have correct information, as opposed to story getting out and the media spinning it, which we've seen them do on Harry, right? They took certain pieces of information and made out Harry in a totally different light than we see him, right?
Yeah.
So I think, it's a pretty good choice for Dumbledore to just get what he believes to be the truth out there for everyone's benefit.
Mm-hmm.
He remembers Cedric, right? And he says that Cedric represented all of the things that really define what being a Hufflepuff means, right? What did you think of that part of his speech?
I think that I agree.
As a Hufflepuff, were you accurately represented in Dumbledore's speech?
Yes.
Good. That's why I wanted to ask you that, because you're our resident Hufflepuff extraordinaire. So, and Dumbledore also stands up to say that I appreciate what Harry did and the part that he played, and he shows a big vote of confidence for Harry and Harry's story, which I think, similar to what we were just talking about, is just good for everyone to have that moving forward. So what else, Melissa? We have the train ride,
where we find out about Rita Skeeter and her hidden ability. Do you have any opinions about Rita and the unregistered animagus bug that she turns into?
I think for being a writer, that was pretty smart of her, but I hate her, so I don't care. And I thought it was awesome that Hermione found out and actually caught her and was like, I'm gonna keep you now.
Yeah, do you think, was Hermione in the right for, basically kidnapping a person?
I don't think she should have gone on the bus and talked about what happened to Harry with Rita Skeeter there. I think before they left Hogwarts, I think she should have, went up to, important people and been like, guess who this is?
So you don't think she should have, because what she's basically saying is, I'll let Rita go when we get to London, and if she does anything else, then I'm going to tell. You think she just should have told? No, one more chance. Just
yeah, I don't care.
You're okay.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that's probably the right thing to do, right? Like, hey, this person has committed a crime. Turn them in.
Literally, here's the jar.
Literally depositing.
I have a present for you.
It's a criminal.
In a jar. She's very little.
So the other thing that happens on the train is Malfoy comes in and is being pretty Malfoyish, and he ends up getting cursed. Right? Any thoughts on 6 people hitting 3 people with curses?
I think that was great.
Yeah,
you approve.
Right.
Yeah, and then they get back to the train station, right? And Harry's back to the Dursleys. Any thoughts on Harry going back after everything he's been through this year? Do you think it's going to be any different at
Everything he's been through, I think he should have stayed with the Weasleys without the Dursleys, because the Weasleys will like treat him normally. Not that the Dursleys wouldn't treat him normally like they do, but the Weasleys just treat him better normal.
They're normal, better normal.
Yeah.
What about Harry giving all of his prize money away?
I think that was nice. I don't think he needs it. He's already freaking rich as it is. But I think he will be just fine with giving that away to the people who need it.
But so he gave it to the twins to make their joke shop. Do you think that was a good use of the winner's money? Would you have done something different?
I would have done the exact same thing.
Joke shop, good choice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Are you ready for your 2 burning questions? All right. Question 1. What might Fudge want to discuss with Dumbledore about the running of the school? Remember, Fudge sort of threatened that to Dumbledore, like, I've let you have free reign and hire whoever, but now we might need to talk about it. What do you think he's going to say?
I think he's gonna be like, yo, I don't like what you're doing, but you're doing a good job at it. I think you should follow what I have to say. And Dumbledore's gonna be like, haha, funny. No, I'm not doing that.
So then what will Fudge do you think?
Fudge will yell at him like he normally does, and then Dumbledore will get his way.
Okay, so Fudge will just complain, you let him complain, and then you get to do what you want anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Question number 2. Do you think Karkaroff will truly escape from Lord Voldemort's clutches?
No, I think he's a runner.
Like they're gonna catch him, or they're gonna kill him, or they're gonna what?
Kind of both.
Both. Okay, so
I think they're gonna catch him and then be like, "You, why did you do that?" And he's gonna be like, "I don't know," and come up with some kind of like BS excuse, and then Voldemort's gonna be like, "Yeah, no, poop, you're dead."
and then he's dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's dead.
All right. Now for some superlatives. What was your favorite line?
My favorite line was when Harry was in the hospital and like McGonagall was yelling to Fudge. Yeah, that's his name. Fudge, and he was like, I've never heard her talk like or yell like that before. This isn't super interesting. And I thought that was pretty funny.
So the best part was when McGonagall was like freaking out and Harry was like, I have never heard her do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was your section MVP?
Hagrid. Always Hagrid.
Why Hagrid?
Because he knew that it was coming. He was like, yeah, I've known for so long. I've known for like years. I've just been waiting. And I thought that was genius.
Okay. Luke, anything else for Miss Lorelai here?
No, I think that's it. So overall thoughts on the ending of this book compared to the other 3 that we've gone through. Does it feel different? Is it better? Did you like it more? Did you not like it as much? What are your thoughts on comparing those?
I think we got a better like goodbye to Hogwarts for this year and like goodbye to everyone for the summer. Like I'll see you next year. Like from the other years, because it's usually just like, oh, Harry won. Great. Okay. Bye.
Yeah. A bit more of an actual wrap up and kind of spending time and actually saying goodbye to people.
Yeah.
Good. That's all I got.
All right. We will see you in a couple weeks for our end of book extravaganza where you have to pick all your favorite everythings.
Yeah.
Are you excited?
Sure.
Great.
It's almost believable.
I know.
Thanks, Lorelai.
Yeah. You're welcome.